that 1996, Prince Charles and Princess Diana got divorced. More than 4% of the UK population got internet access. Mitja Popovic, Serbian painter, died. And I moved to London and officially became a British Serb. My name is Maja Jordan. I was born in Belgrade, and my love for music led me to become a classical pianist. My other passion is promoting Serbia and Serbian culture, so I joined Serbian Council of Great Britain when it was founded in 2004 and have been an active member ever since. In the unusual circumstances in which we find ourselves in 2020, instead of self-isolating, the Serbian Council invites you to connect and share your story with others. We have different life experiences, but we have one thing in common. We were either born in Serbia or born in Britain but have Serbian origins, or are connected with Serbia in some way. So, what is your story? Let's find out what a couple story will reveal. Welcome! Dobrodošli na Čašicu razgovora. Graham Perolls, our guest today, is Chief Executive Officer of Hospices of Hope, the man who made a difference to many people, not just in UK, but also in the Balkans and including Serbia. And we are very grateful that you joined us today. But what I really want to hear is how a man who started with a family car business became a man who was awarded OBE, Order of British Empire by Queen for his charity work. Can you please start from the beginning?
Well, yeah, thank you for inviting me. So really the story has two parts. The first part was that I went to Romania in 1975 in the communist era, just really for a bit of adventure. And during that visit, I made friends with a young couple in the city of Brasov. We'd actually got lost, and the guy came up to me and asked if he could help show the way back to our hotel, and that was the start of the friendship. I went back to Romania several times in the 70s, and so I really saw Romania, when it was at its worst. And then the other part of the story was happened in the late 70s when my father was diagnosed with cancer. He had a very painful illness, and eventually someone told me about St Christopher's Hospice in London. I'd never heard of a hospice, but I called them and they came to get my father, who was in really excruciating pain. And when we arrived at the hospice, I immediately felt we were in safe hands. And they very quickly got his pain under control, and then he came back home. And he lived for another year. And during that time, I really learnt, what it meant to care for someone who was terminally ill, and realised that all the pain that he'd had before was really completely unnecessary. So when my father died, I decided that I really wanted to start a hospice in my hometown in Kent. Now, I obviously had to first of all take over the family business, which, as you say, was a car business. But I got it up and running, and I wrote to Cicely Saunders, who founded the hospice movement, and said that no, I wanted to start a hospice. And perhaps very wisely, she said, well, you've just been through a very difficult bereavement. Wait a year and then write to me again. Now, like many people, the good idea sort of evaporated, and 4 years later, I'd almost forgotten about it, but then my mother died quite suddenly. And her death was very different to my father's. She wasn't cared for by a hospice, she was in a hospital. And it really was quite a painful experience. And I realised again just how much hospice care could really help someone at the end of life. So this time I decided not to ask Cicely. I was just going to go ahead and start a hospice. So it was the Eleanor, that was named after my parents, Ellen and Norman,
I see,
and started in 1984. So then in 1989, the Romanian Revolution happened. I went back to Romania just really a few days afterwards to see if my friends were safe. And on that visit, I was taken to the cancer hospital in Brasov, and I saw a young man dying in terrible pain. And the doctor there said, you know, I'd like to help him, but we have no pain medication. There's nothing we can do. And I think it sowed a seed in my mind that maybe this was my mission to help develop hospice care in Southeast Europe, building on the experience that I'd had in Kent. So that's a very brief version of the story.
Yeah, obviously your personal experience was the main driving force behind this, but to do something like that, it's not just that, I guess it's that energy and that willingness and much more to be put in. And what I like that, what you have been recommended to leave it for a year, because obviously when we go through emotional trouble, then we don't maybe think clearly. But leaving the time, then we can do more effectively our work. It's obviously something what is very good suggestion for everybody. And then you worked in Romania, but how Serbia came in the picture afterwards?
So in 2001, we had our first Balkan Hospice Conference in Bucharest, and a doctor from Serbia came to that conference, and she said to me, look, I really want to start hospice care in Serbia. He tried during the Milosevic regime, but had been knocked back. And I said to her, Natasha, you know, when the time is right, I promise that I will help you. Also around that time, the Open Society and the University of Sheffield commissioned a report on hospice or palliative care in the whole of Central and Southeast Europe. And the report highlighted what they called 5 beacons. And one of those beacons was the hospice that I started in Romania, Hospice Casa Speranței. And they wanted us to reach out to the countries around that didn't have hospice care. And they were countries like Serbia, like Bulgaria, like Albania, Moldova. So they didn't give us any money, but we launched an appeal and we managed to raise £1 million in the UK to progress what we've been requested to do. And so I contacted Natasha, and in 2005 I said that we'd like to help. So Serbia was really our second country. Natasha then set up a kind of association, I think it was called in Serbia at that time, called Bell Hospice. And so Hospices of Hope became Bell Hospice's partner. We were very fortunate in the beginning because at that time, one of the pioneers of the hospice movement in the UK, Prue Defoe, died. And one of the big foundations in London wanted to do something in her memory. And they had in mind to build an education centre somewhere in London. And they contacted her sister, and her sister said, oh, Prue would hate that, having a building with her name on it in London. And the trust said, well, what do you think she would like? And she said, well, she'd like hospice care in a country where it isn't already established. And the trust said, well, that's funny because I had an email just this last week from a Graham Perolls from Hospices of Hope, and he was saying that he wanted to do something in Serbia. And Victoria, Prue's sister, said, perfect. And I didn't know how much money it was going to be, but they gave us £200,000. And that paid for a doctor, 5 nurses over the first 3 years of Bell Hospice. So that's how we got started.
Yeah, things that sometimes happen just as a destiny is pushing them forward. just to link together. And I call them signs on the road, because I do follow these little signs which just lead you to much bigger things afterwards. Now, working in Serbia and working in England, very different story, I guess. So I guess that wasn't easy because of different laws, different attitude and all that. So which difficulties you had to organize your project?
I rather naively thought that, having worked in Romania, that Serbia would be a piece of cake. It actually proved to be much more difficult, and still continues to be so. And there's one big problem that we haven't yet managed to overcome, and that is that the Serbian government doesn't recognise that NGOs like ourselves, non-governmental organisations, can provide medical care. Mm-hmm. So that presented a huge difficulty for us, because the hospice movement has as a guiding principle to offer care free of charge to patients. And so we don't want to be a private health system, because that means we have to charge patients. So we continue to struggle to find a way of providing hospice care for patients within the legal framework. So for many years we were really kind of providing a hospice service with our hands tied behind our back, because our doctors couldn't prescribe medicine, and there were many things that we weren't able to do that we would be able to do here. We're now registered under the Social Ministry as a socio-medical organisation. So that means that we can offer care to patients in their own homes and in our newly built centre in Serbia, in Belgrade. But we still need to find a way to legally be able to offer inpatient care. And I don't know when that will happen, and I hope and pray it will be in my lifetime, but nothing has really changed. And since we started in 2005, that is still the same problem, that the government doesn't recognise charities or non-governmental organisations as providers of medical care.
Yeah, it's a very different story in Serbia, generally, with the laws and everything else. Do you think that because we are not European Union, that would be the reason? And Romania is, if I'm trying to compare Romania and Serbia, because not comparing with England, because it's really different story. But between Romania and Serbia, if you say that Serbia is harder even than Romania, will that be the difference if we are part of European Union, or not really?
I think if Serbia does move towards the European Union, then they will have to, give on this particular. So I think it's a matter of time, but as the years have gone by, it has really been a barrier for us. We haven't been able to move quickly because of this unfortunate regulation.
Yeah. Now this is where Serbian diaspora comes in the picture, because we live outside of Serbia, and we've been fighting for certain things for years, and I have to say in some fields we have been successful, like Serbian City Club. They managed to speed the process of notifications of diplomas. And that was also very long yearly process, but now it's much shorter. It has to be, I think, 90 days. We experience much better systems which could be implemented in Serbia. Do you think that we could help, or you've been in touch with our diaspora, but how much you are connected with Serbian diaspora in UK, and how much they help up to now, and how much they could help in the future, maybe from your point of view?
I've had a lot of contact with the Serbian diaspora, and some, people like yourself and like others have been incredibly helpful. If there's anybody who has some link to the government that can help us with this particular problem, because that problem is blocking everything else. It's like a plug that, without that plug being released, there's a lot more we can't do. So we're always on the lookout for people who can specifically find a way to help us with that. I think the Serbian diaspora in London, from my experience, is a little bit, sort of spread around, and it's quite hard sometimes to know where to go and who to connect with. We've had various ambassadors, during the time of the project, and they've usually been very open and helpful. We've had events at the embassy or the residence, and that has helped us to connect with Serbian people. We've also been fortunate to meet people who've been able to help us financially. We've had concerts, as you probably are aware of, and we try to also, as well, because what we do is quite sad. We're looking after people who are terminally ill, who are dying, so we try to kind of balance that with happier things. So we like to showcase Serbian talent, so by having Serbian musicians perform and introducing them to the UK, that's been another side of the work which we really enjoy doing.
Yeah, obviously we have to do more because our eyes are always in Serbia, and our hearts are obviously always there, regardless that we live long time, some of us abroad, because it seems that cancer rate mortality is much bigger now than it was before. Serbia is one of the top countries with that issue. To blame or not to blame the war and the depleted uranium which was actually used in the time, so that is what we are really bitter about, because you have lots of children which are now having cancer and other defects, but as nothing can be returned, and it's return history, at least we can do something maybe in front to help those coming. Now, how far you went, and how this care looks now, and what are your future plans if we overcome these issues that you do have for Belgrade and for Serbia?
Well, we started with a home care team with doctors and nurses who are visiting patients in their own homes in Belgrade, and that was the way we really operated for many years. We then tried to make the team more multidisciplinary, which is something a bit new in Serbia. So we added a social worker, a chaplain, and a physiotherapist, and other members of the team who can help patients, during their illness. So the team then got bigger, and then we decided it was the right time to build a centre for patients to come, at least to have care during the day. So we now have a centre that we bought a property with the help of actually an English guy who invested a lot of money in it, and we converted it into a hospice day centre. Now that was opened last year, beginning of last year, and the patients were absolutely loving it. Then, of course, this year COVID-19 hit, and so we had to close the centre temporarily, because obviously bringing vulnerable people together is just not possible. And we can't wait to get it open again, because it was doing such a good service to the people who often feel very isolated if you have cancer, and you're on your own, particularly if you just shut up in a house. It's a very lonely existence, and you can be very afraid as well of what's going to happen. Very often in Serbia, people are admitted to hospital when they have pain, or in the last days of their illness, and they end up dying in hospital, which is not really the best for the patient. So we've expanded our home care service. So we don't just have what we call specialist palliative care nurses and doctors. We also have nurses who can do the practical care, and so we try to keep patients at home if we possibly can, so that they can die at home.
Yeah, lots is happening, comparing with nothing happening before that, obviously. And it is about that mentality when you compare UK or maybe West altogether. People in needs are the priority number one, obviously, in England. And they are looked after as a special in one way. in Balkans, people with needs tend to hide from public. They almost don't want to show maybe the pride that we do have, I must say, through the wars and all history, not this war, but I mean through the longer history, that pride kept us going. So regardless that we suffer, we try to kind of ignore it all that. But then you come to the position that many patients, terminally ill patients, are coming to. We are really grateful for all this work, and especially grateful to show Serbian doctors and nurses how to deal with that and to overcome this maybe pride thing, and how to help. So that is also really important, not just literally physical help, but what you are offering there. Tell me a little bit more about your experience in Serbia on the other side, not just these bad ones. I guess you have been visiting Serbia during and what are your experience about the country altogether?
Perhaps just before I go on to that, just to say, I mean, a lot of people maybe don't know what hospice care is at all. And really, it was founded in the UK in 1967 by a doctor. And the whole point of hospice care is that you're not treating the disease so much, you're treating the person and the family around that person. And so it's very holistic. You're treating the physical illness, you're treating the emotional problems surrounding the illness, the spiritual problems, you know, why me? This is a punishment from God, you know, why have this happened? And the social part, you know, because people maybe lose their jobs and they can't exist on a very small pension or something like that. So it's a very holistic approach to medicine, and very widespread now in all of the world. So Serbia,
learn, yeah. I mean, not us here in England, but what Balkan people have to learn. That there is other side, not just pain, but that other side, and help to be accepted from others, not just from family, because we are used to have friends and family around. But then what hospice does helps families to how to deal with that. That is the very important issue, which we really have to learn because we are not used to that level of care. And about the Serbia now.
Yeah, so I have to say I really love Serbia. I have been many times since 1975. I mean, I'm probably there, you know, obviously at the moment I can't travel so much, but normally I'm there 4 or 5 times a year. So I know particularly Belgrade quite well. And I think it's a really lovely city. And when I bring people with me, in fact, we had an insight trip last year where we brought a group of people to see both the hospice but also to experience Serbia, and everyone goes away saying, oh, you know, if only we'd have known, we'd have been here before. I think there's a lovely street vibe, you know, walking along Kalemegdan and to Kalemegdan along the pedestrianised zone, and then coming to that amazing castle and then looking over the wall to the river Sava. I mean, it's just a very special place. But more than that, I've really grown to love our Serbian team. They're people with such spirit and resolve and commitment, and they work very hard, and you know, they really have taken the whole hospice concept into their hearts. So I'm probably a very good ambassador for Serbia when people ask me. I mean, I know that sometimes Serbia doesn't have the best image in the UK for various reasons, but you know, when people ask me, I say, you know, okay, forget politics for the moment, and just, you know, my experience of Serbia, the people, the country is very positive, so you should definitely go. I find the food sometimes a bit too meat oriented.
It is very heavy comparing with English boiled.
But I've also discovered some restaurants in Belgrade that I really love. You know, so the food, you know, you can find really good food. And the Serbian wine is lovely as well. I think, you know, we don't have it, you know, in the shops in the UK. I don't know why, because it's some of the best wine I've tasted. So yeah, I do fly the flag for Serbia, definitely.
So what your glass will be filled with? Because our story is called cup of story, or on Serbian Čašica, razgovora. Čašica is really the small glass where we drink rakia, and we have this saying similar what means really cup of story. Like, have you been drinking rakia at all or not, or wine?
I'm afraid no. I'm afraid no. That's not my favourite. As in Romania, the equivalent of suica, it's not to my palate.
It's a bit too strong.
I don't really know.
So you would stick with wine, I guess, yeah.
I try to be polite if I'm offered it, but it's not something I would choose to drink. No.
Yeah, maybe you should try hot one, because in the winter you do with lots of sugar and water. We call it hot rakia, which is very, very good for colds, and if you're for flu, for example. And as I don't drink rakia at all, it's too strong. But that hot one I can, because it's diluted with the water and it's pretty sweet. So maybe that's to overcome the issue of hospitality altogether. And okay, you don't like rakia. What else you are not so keen in Serbia? Because we like to hear this. Everybody are praising us, obviously, like how it's beautiful. And we know about this hospitality. But anything else apart of these technical things for work that you don't like about Serbia?
Well, I think the transport infrastructure needs to be improved a bit. I have to admit, I quite frequently sit in traffic jams in Belgrade, and it's especially annoying when you're trying to get to a patient and you have to, waste an hour in the car to get there. So I think it definitely needs a metro.
Yeah, that was planned for you long ago. But for me, I start to walk when I'm getting stuck, because like in England, the distances are huge. So you can't really walk from A to B. But when you're stuck in traffic in Belgrade, or when your tram or trolley bus doesn't come at all for a kind of hour, then I suggest start to walk. That is much faster. Of course, depends where it is, where you are going. Yeah. Where are you usually staying in Belgrade when you're going there?
I have been outside of Belgrade. In fact, we had a wonderful fundraising trip on Tito's train.
Oh,
we
okay.
hired the train, and we brought out a lot of people from the UK. We advertised in the Times newspaper, and we got a lot of people. And some of those people have gone on to support Bell Hospice over the years. But the start was a journey on Tito's train, and that was very fascinating. And I've also been to Zlatibor, which is very beautiful. I'd like to explore more of Serbia. It's just usually I don't have time.
Yeah, if you are there for work, then time running flies really quickly altogether. Great. Now, what about your work here in England, about hospices in England during the pandemic? Have you managed to overcome the issues? So I can see that you are doing still lots of events, and you're still very enthusiastic to continue with your work. So is it going more or less smoothly?
Well, when COVID-19 hit in March, obviously, we realised we were facing a huge challenge. So we launched an appeal, and I have to say that our supporters were just so generous. And we obviously had to cancel all our events, which are a big part of our fundraising. But somehow, the money came in, and we were able to support our partners. Now, in Romania, Serbia, and other countries we work in, like Moldova and Albania, more or less the same thing happened, that cancer patients were discharged from the hospitals. In fact, I heard in Belgrade that a lot of staff at the oncology hospital in Belgrade had COVID-19, and therefore they had to close the hospital. So that meant that we were then inundated with patients who were pretty desperate, because being discharged from hospital without any solution was quite traumatic. So our medical team has done all they can during the pandemic to keep the services going, and we've found new ways of communicating with patients, through using video and technology. Of course, that doesn't replace the face-to-face visits, but we have been able to keep going. And I've had some copies sent to me of letters from very, very grateful people who felt that they had no one, and suddenly the hospice team appeared, and they felt supported and cared for. So I'm very happy I'm very proud of our teams, really, that they have found ways to keep going. In Serbia, you know, obviously we were worried about the finances. I have to give credit to the Norwegian embassy. They've been extremely helpful to us, as have some of our the corporate sponsors who've, you know, responded to the situation and, you know, helped us to keep going.
I'm pleased to hear that you found the base, and I want to tell to our listeners there's lots of events happening online. There is a Caribbean cuisine, cooking, quizzes, so Serbian Council is trying to advertise, but our listeners can go to your website and find all these events which are in all sorts of different regions happening, like in South England and places, and hopefully to support more your cause, because we are very grateful to you and your team for everything what you did in Serbia, and we hope that your energy will not disappear and that we can help more. So we will be in touch, and hopefully pandemic will go quicker than we expect, and that the patients will have a proper care that you prepared, and that you can carry on with your work further on with Serbia and further.
Well, the encouraging thing is that the next generation are coming along. My youngest daughter is very passionate about the hospice work, and so she's our fundraising director now, and she's following in the steps, and really working very hard to raise money for our projects. So there are people who in the UK who really care about Serbian patients, and who want to make sure that we do the best to ensure that hospice care becomes part of the medical system.
Yeah, thank you to you and your team, and also to Serbian team, which is working hard. And we will be in touch, and I hope to have interview again, maybe in year time or 2 years times, to see how further you could go in Serbia. Thanks a lot, and good luck with all your work.
Thank you. You're very welcome.